Good afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of the People Progressing Podcast. And today I'm really excited. I have Sean Hutchinson on our show today. He's going to talk a little bit about family-owned businesses and some other things that he's doing now. But this is going to be kind of a talk about business and some of those things. And I'm kind of excited about that because it's kind of a different little twist, but it's still going to give us an idea of what makes a successful person tick. So Sean, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
I always ask my guests first and foremost is where did you grow up? What did you like to do as a kid? What are some of the influencing factors in your life that's kind of shaped you to where you are now?
Mm. So I grew up in Oklahoma City, and I left Oklahoma when I graduated with my undergraduate degree to go to Ohio, Miami, Ohio. So Oklahoma is a very tight knit kind of place. Everybody seems to know everybody, right? There's a strong value system. I grew up in a really close family, in particular with my grandfather and grandmother on my mom's side, who we would see every weekend when I was growing up. We would stay with them, and they had a great influence on my life. I can't really say, I couldn't say that they shaped me academically necessarily, they just shaped me as a person. But here was the event that changed my life when my grandfather walked in when I was 7 years old with a set of junior golf clubs. And from that point forward, my life was really different because I fell in love with the game. Now, why do I bring that up? So golf for me has been such a touch point because it's a highly strategic game, right? You have to be able to see many different ways to do the same thing in a sense. You know where you're going, but you can, play any number of shots to get there. And the sort of endless variety of the game, it's never the same. The weather's different, the grass is different, the air is humid or dry. I mean, no matter what's going on, you're playing a different game every time you play it. And that's very, very challenging. I mean, there's so many different factors. Sometimes I still play golf today and I play it well. I ended up going to college on a golf scholarship. So that was like a big trajectory for me. I was a really good junior player, continue to be a good player today. I think the reason that I loved the game so much is that it required me to see around corners, as we say, right? It required me to plan ahead and to really think about what strategy in that game environment is going to be. And I think golf is the ultimate gamification of strategy, honestly. I mean, you talk about gamification these days and the way that people learn through gaming, the way they learn through gamification of problems and solutions. For me, that's been an ultimate influence. Besides that fact, it's a game of very high values, right? I mean, there's no referee. You have to referee yourself. Yeah. Often playing against the golf course, although you're competing against other people, your competition is the game itself, not necessarily a team of others, even though it is a team sport in college and things like that. So you learn how to play with people. You learn how to be true to yourself and your game. You learn how to hit, many times shots that you didn't even know you had. So you're constantly surprised, and you walk away with a great sense of accomplishment when you do it well. Today, sometimes I hit a shot and I'm like, I don't really know. Thinking back on it, I don't really know where that came from. I don't know how I hit it. How does anybody ever hit a straight golf ball? I mean, one little millimeter of difference makes a huge difference. So it's just such an interesting game. And that was the turning point, I think, in my early life, where I was challenged to solve complex problems on an ongoing basis. That played right into academics. It played into my career, my value system, everything kind of interesting. That was the touch point. That was the stone that I've tied everything.
God, I love that story. I'll say this because I kind of look at golf and baseball a little bit the same in the fact that there's no clock to stop it.
Yep.
There's a lot of strategy involved. Baseball's more obviously a team sport, and golf's more of an individual sport. But what it does, as a coach, I used to say the same thing as a coach. I'm using the game of baseball, and I coach football, the game of football, to help prepare my kids for life. my kids for their careers because the correlations were there all the time.
Yeah,
Man, you just described that perfectly with golf and what you're doing now. And we'll get into that here in a minute. This is
sure,
fascinating to
sure.
me. You came from a family owned business.
Yep.
What was that business and what did that teach you growing up, watching your grandpa and your dad run this business? And how did that help shape you to what you're doing now?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So our family business is a millwork back in Oklahoma City. It was established by my dad's dad and his brother, dad's
Okay.
uncle,
Okay.
in I want to say it was 1956. So it's it's been around a while, and it's
Wow.
I'm the third generation, but a business to survive that long and not always thrive. Every business goes through cycles, but to I think have that longevity, there's a lot that has to happen that's right. And my grandfather and uncle weren't particularly strong business people. I think my dad, when my dad had gone off into a different career. It's funny, you and I have talked about it. My dad actually at age 19 was recruited to play professional baseball, but then finding out that he was going to be a dad at the age of 22, he decided that he was going to have to pursue a different kind of career because they weren't making a whole lot of money off baseball back then. And
Yeah.
take a kid on the road, it's tough. It's tough
Yeah.
life.
It's really hard.
So he went into computer science and he spent quite a bit of time there. And then my grandfather asked him after his brother had died. He asked my dad if he would come back into the business. My dad has been running it now for probably 40 years. So what I learned, I think, because I never worked there. It was very interesting. My dad never asked me to work there. He would have gladly had me do it. But my family has always said you pursue your passion, right? And that's fine. Find something that you really love and go there.
Love it.
Keep your strength, keep your academics strong, right? It was always very clear, no matter what you do, you're going to school. You're going to get a degree. If you can do it, you're going to get a master's degree. And I worked my way through school. I think what it taught me to see my dad running the family business is, one, families, you can't really separate a family business from the family itself, right? So anybody that says I'm not going to take my work home with me in a family business is just not dealing with the reality.
Yeah.
I saw my dad in the computer science area, and by the way, he was working with mainframes that filled like airplane hangars, right? Back in those days, they had less computing power in those big rooms than we do have in our phone. And it was punch cards and all kinds of things, right? It was just kind of coming online, so to speak. There was a lot to think about, but it was also not very efficient work. And he would work sometimes 24, 36 hours straight if there were problems. So I think what I was picking up is that there's a work ethic here that has to be respected. And it was always there was kind of a kitchen table awareness, if you will, that, hey, we're in family business. Hey, we might not always have, the best access to a lot of money, right? There were times, I think, when my dad probably didn't take a paycheck or, had to reduce compensation to keep the thing going. I saw the tension between him and his dad because they didn't always see eye to eye. And sometimes my grandfather would pull rank, even though, my dad was really running the business. And I also saw what can happen when families don't really plan for transition. The transition from my grandfather to my dad, it occurred at my grandfather's death.
Okay.
Never talked to my father about what was going to happen. So my dad had 1% of the business at that point. Granddad had 99. And my dad didn't know until the will was read whether he was going to own the other 99%. It's possible that it could have been divided up among all the kids, but my grandfather just wouldn't tell him. I always wondered why that was the case, right? Why it's not a good business decision to have that kind of ability. Why wouldn't you communicate about it? I think there was a little bit of a retention of authority, maybe a little power play going on. Never really got to talk to grandfather about it because he had passed away. So it was just kind of weird. I began to get a sense of the family dynamics and the way that family business will often the way that it operates will mirror the way that the family dynamics operate. So it's different ecosystems, but linked together, right? Overlapping. So that was, there are lessons in there that you have to think about. I've always been convinced that family businesses are great. They can be great, and they can be a complete disaster because they're really a challenging dynamic kind of built into it. Now, I was never really pulled into that. It wasn't, but I think my parents, mom and dad, bore the brunt of it and tried to, keep it out of sight. Looking back on it and the kind of work that I do now, there are so many things that I would do differently, and that my dad and I are working on today to make sure that we've got a good plan for transitioning from his ownership to whatever the successor generation ownership is going to be. And look, selling the business is on the table because I'm not going to go back and work in it. My sister doesn't work in it. Nobody's kind of returning home. We've pursued our passions. We live in other parts of the country. So, we could be passive owners and have, a good management team. We could choose to sell it. It's clear that in the next generation, things are going to change. They're going to be very different than they have been.
So is that story you talked about with your grandpa and your dad is very fascinating. Is that kind of what led you into what you're doing now? I mean, you saw what that was and how much stress and anxiety that put on your dad, not knowing what was going to happen.
Yeah, no, I don't think it had a whole lot, at least consciously, it didn't have a lot to do with it. I think it's made me empathize with family business owners and the families that are,
there you go.
We call them families in business, right?
Okay.
So it's not really, families may have multiple entrepreneurial interests within their family. And the way that they use their wealth and manage their wealth, their assets, business assets, and otherwise can be very unique to the family itself. It depends a little bit on what their value system is. So I don't think that I was necessarily drawn to the work that we do around creating value and creating transition opportunities for business owners and their families just because I was in family business. But I started doing the work, which really came out of mergers and acquisition advisory, right? It was,
yeah.
I was the CEO of a company, and we built the company, grew the company based on a series of acquisitions. And then I got really interested in deal making. I enjoyed that. I went into M&A advisory, but then I also felt myself drawn back into actually running the company, which is what I did as a CEO. Strategic, but we were, elbow deep in it every day. And I really liked it. I liked that operational and strategic aspect of building something and building it quickly. I'm very much a quick growth strategy guy in my particular set of expertise. So I think that push pull of, I like the deal making to grow a company. I think I'll do that. Started an investment bank, did that for a while, sensed a dissatisfaction, drawn back then to the sort of strategy and day-to-day operations. How do you actually grow and improve a business? And then all of a sudden, I think surfaced lessons that were coming from the family business experience that we have in the Hutchinson family, but also sort of overlapping, learning from other family dynamics and entrepreneurial dynamics, regardless of whether it's family owned or not. So it just all began to kind of connect. I think it's been a little bit of a pinball career, honestly. I mean, it didn't even start in business. It started in nonprofit management. So I learn quickly, and I'm able to kind of layer things together. And so it's been a build. The pivot from nonprofit to for-profit was not hard. There are lessons in both of those that you can really soak up. But I wouldn't have predicted that this would be the career path.
Yeah.
I was going to be an academic, to be honest. That was the goal. I was going to get a PhD. I was going to teach until I figured out there are no jobs and everybody gets paid, $25,000 a year and struggles to get by. So that wasn't a good career choice, but it was what I wanted to do at the time.
Yeah, but you're still teaching now. I mean, you're helping business owners and stuff around the country on a daily basis. So you're serving and helping and teaching every day.
I think that's true. And that's kind of how we view, it's not kind of a, we know, and we're, sort of imparting our knowledge. It's, we have a skill set.
Yeah.
Owners have that skill as well. Some don't. Some of their teams have certain skills, and we can complement that. So it becomes a really powerful, I think, complementary kind of collaborative environment where we can help with what we're good at and add value, and by complementing what the team and the owners already have going on. So we're not, we call it value acceleration instead of value creation, because it's kind of a yes and process. Yes, we're doing really well there. And what can we do in order to continue to build the value and the transferability of the business? That's really key. The thing that I've noticed a lot about owners, and it almost happened in our family too, is one, they work so hard, so many hours, so hard for so long. They don't really stop and think about, hey, I'm building this valuable thing, and maybe I'm going to pass it on, maybe I'm going to try to sell it, but I'm going to at some point probably want to harvest the value out of this thing one way or another. And they also sort of late in the cycle, as they're maybe aging or whatever that dynamic looks like, they often feel stuck. They don't know what their options are. That's an uncomfortable situation for business owners and entrepreneurs, because one of the reasons that they started their own companies is to have control, right?
Yeah.
Some extent control over their destiny. You get to the point where you're thinking about, what's this next act going to look like for me beyond business? Is it going to be I'm dying at my desk? Is it going to be I'm going to sell my business for $100 million? Is it going to be I'm passing it on to the next generation? And it becomes a very complex black box conversation that gets uncomfortable really quickly, because it doesn't feel like it's in a controlled environment. One of the things that we can do is, through that teaching, you want to call it that facilitation, that collaboration, is demystify what seems like a black box, right? Turn the black more to blue. A black box becomes a blue ocean in a sense. And that's incredibly gratifying. It's like it's a student who just one day wakes up and says, you can see them move from level 1 to level 5. Just boom, they go. You've seen it in athletes, right? You saw it in your baseball, right? When you were playing baseball, you hit those inflection points where you just jump to the next level. And it's because you're working, it's because you're trying, it's because you're really bearing down on it. And I think it's important for in this kind of work for our clients to become really intentional about what it is that they're trying to do. But they need the tools, right? They need the pathway. And that's kind of what we provide to facilitate that, to get them to the point where they don't have to do it themselves, first of all, and they're open to outside perspectives and advice and other tools that they may not have. It's really empowering, I think, for us and for our clients.
Well, you got me on a couple of things there. It's really interesting. One, I want to do it before I forget it. They're open to being coached.
Yeah.
And the second thing was, I call them the light bulb moments, when they understand something and all of a sudden they grow. They understand something, they grow. They understand something, they get more confidence. And that's what you're providing them on a basically a daily basis, is those coaching and teaching things that you can give them to turn those light bulbs on.
Yeah.
It's so much exactly like what I did as a coach in athletics, what you're doing in business. And I think that's beautiful. But I think the key point, Sean, really what you just made was, if they're accepting and open to it.
Yeah.
There's so many people that you deal with sometimes that think they are the expert. They think they are, and they're the ones that you can't get through to. And they're the ones who might need it the most.
That may be, and that receptiveness to advice, to other perspectives, is a powerful thing. I'll tell you a story. So Dennis Jaffe, who's one of the world's really foremost experts in family business, he's previously an academic at Saybrook University. Now Dennis has retired from that, and he just advises families all over the world. But he's written a lot of books, and his most recent book is called Borrowed from Your Grandchildren, which harkens back to an old saying, and I have no idea where it comes from, that says you don't own your business, you borrowed it from your grandchildren, which is applicable, I think, to a lot of family businesses.
Yeah.
In this particular book, he decided that he would study 6th generation businesses, right? You're talking about businesses that are 200 years old, right? And family enterprises, if you will. Usually by the time you get that far down the road in an entrepreneurial family, you got a lot of business interests and you got a really complex asset base. You probably have family governance in place. You got a family charter because you've been managing generation and generation and generation. You want that through line to be pretty stable. So he wanted to study those situations and find out, because it's so rare, maybe shared characteristics were there in those family enterprises that might have powered that longevity, that success. And he found 6 that didn't show up in every situation, but showed up enough that he could put them on the matrix, right?
Okay.
But 2 that showed up every time. One was, by the second generation, the family had hired professional management and brought them in. So they had said, might not be that they'd hired a CEO, but they were starting to build a management team, starting to build a C-suite. That's fairly early because a lot of families kind of stick with family only management structures, right? They're really jealous. They set hard boundaries in a sense. They're jealous of their equity and they're jealous of their management in the business. The second thing was that those family businesses had set up a board of directors with at least 2 independent, outside, non-family, non-employee directors who their job was really to be an independent fiduciary, right, for the business. This wasn't a board of advisors, by the way. That's a great place to start for a lot of businesses. But these were real fiduciary boards of directors with real authority to manage the CEO of the business. What does that say? In those 2 instances, early in the process, those family owners had said, outside advice, outside perspective is going to help us. And it did. It really did. So I thought it was fascinating that those steps that were probably no more than 10, 15, 20 years into the cycle of business, maybe sooner, would make a difference 150, 170, 100, 200 years down the line. In the 6th generation, they had gotten so good at accepting outside perspective that it was allowing the family actually to become a governing enterprise, in a sense, with a charter, with values that would extend through many, many generations, and help them build enormous wealth base. I mean, these were families that ended up with a lot of money in their pocket. So, and that of course enabled multiple generations to be successful in their own business ventures, because they would set up things like family banks and, the whole bit. So, I mean, the Bear family in Germany is a really good example of this.
Mm-hmm.
I think 600 years or something in the business. It's just ridiculous how long they've been doing it and how many generations they are, but they've gotten really good at it.
And that outside perspective is so fascinating to me that, God, when you do it just hit me that the people that are open to that their egos don't get in the way.
That's true.
And they don't slow the process down. They're helping the process grow and progress because they're saying, I don't know it all. And those companies have a growth mindset, constant growth mindset, and we're okay bringing someone else in to help us grow. I think that's fascinating.
Right. And in some of those cases, relatively early on, the founder of the business has taken themselves out of the chief executive position and put themselves in a position that reflects in their mind what they're really good at and what they're really passionate about.
Wow.
I remember a client that we had that was in the cybersecurity space, right? So, good space to be in.
Yeah.
And now. And he was a super intelligent guy, but the cybersecurity, their job, it's very technical, right? It's really like in the code. So, and that was his expertise. It was what he loved. And he knew that if he didn't build a team, he was always going to be stuck in a job, which to a certain extent was expected of him because he was the founder. But he broke the mold on that. What he told his team is, I don't feel like I'm really great at this. I know our company is going to grow rapidly because we're in this, this industry that's just going to take off. We've got great clients, but what I enjoy doing is being in the lab. Yeah. I want to create new product. I want to create new service. I've got all of these ideas, but my time is being sucked up over here as chief executive. And to be frank, I don't really enjoy it. And I don't think I'm all that good at it. So everybody was, sort of went, wow, that's amazingly self-aware, first of all. But it's a good example of a guy who had that kind of awareness and a sense of who he is, right? Enough of that center to be able to say, I know who I am, I know what I do well, and I'm not gonna take the CEO job just because people think that the person who founded the company naturally should fill those shoes.
Yeah, what a great example of, I always, talk to people about putting people on the bus. Then it's the next, it's not just putting people on the bus, it's putting the right people on the bus. And then it's putting the right people on the bus and putting them in the right seats on the bus.
That's right. That's right.
And what a great example of the guy who started his own company realizing I need to be in this seat for this to work. And that seat wasn't at the top. He wasn't necessarily driving the bus, but it goes, Sean, that goes back to what you're talking about, follow your passion. He needed to do his passion.
Sure.
He needed to be working in his passion in that industry, right, and let some other people do what they do best. A fascinating example of putting yourself in the right seat. That's awesome. I love that. It's
yeah. And the ego, his ego was not
right
in the way of his success.
Right.
That the part of the growth engine in this business wasn't just going to be its technical performance, but its people. Right.
Fascinating.
And he's a very brainy guy. We've had other clients with very thoughtful founders who, even if they were in CEO positions, they saw themselves as facilitators of greater talent in their organization. They were talent developers, right? And you look, I remember when Andy Grove, right, said the Intel CEO, right? And someone asked him, what's the job of a CEO? And he said, the job of the CEO is training. And it completely caught me off guard, because his position was, I have things to share. My job is to build the best people inside this organization. So I'm the trainer, not the boss. I'm the trainer. What a way to sort of flip the script. I mean, you talk about servant leadership. We can talk about that all day long, and I like the concept, but what's the servant do? In Andy's world, it was train other people, help them perform better to the extent that you can. And then as they perform better, the organization grows. And it would be great to be the founder of a company and just be able to do what you're passionate about all day long. Right? I mean, that would be for most founder CEOs. I think they're probably a long way from the things that they felt when they founded the company, when they had that fire, that excitement about being an entrepreneur, maybe for the first time. You don't get, it's like a relationship, right? A long relationship, some of that burns off. It's only natural to do it. But if you get too far from the center of your passions, right? If you get too far from that bliss, then you lose your way. And when the founder and the CEO lose their way, then the company follows.
Yeah, it's two thoughts. I believe the same thing. The CEO of a company, I don't think they should ever use the term boss ever again.
No.
I call it boss versus coach, and I'm from the athletic world, so he called it, his job as a CEO was training. I would say coaching. It's kind of the same thing. Sure. I always say that you better be coaching your people, because if your people aren't growing and your people aren't progressing, your business is going to not grow and not progress.
Right.
So the job of the CEO is all of those things that we all think of, but I think the main job is the coaching part of helping your people grow and progress, putting them in the right seats, putting the people that work for you in the right seat, and doing their passion within your company.
Right.
And that's a very strategic thing to do.
It is. It begs some questions, I think. So one question is, what is the organization designed to look like, right? So
Okay.
organization design is really important. And in a lot of organizations, I think it's less common than it has been in the past these days. But you had the organizational chart and it looked like a pyramid. So you had one at the top and then you had all this stuff and it just branches off. And if you go into, software today, Visio or anything like that, they've still got the template hierarchical, somebody's got to be at the top. There has to be, ultimately, it's important for organizations to be able to make good decisions quickly. There's no question. However, the information necessary to make those decisions flows in the organization. How close can you get it to the point of performance, right? So if you've got a manufacturing business that has a manager on the floor and they're not making decisions because they feel like they don't have the authority, or they're making them slowly, or they're avoiding taking responsibility for it, whatever that looks like, or they don't have the information they need to make a good decision, it starts to float up that ladder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, somebody is saying, "Oh, we'll get all the way to the CEO and the founder. They'll make the decision, and it's going to flow back down to the organization. Problem solved. We'll just wait for that to happen." But it's not at the point of performance. It's not fast enough, right? So that affects the culture of the organization. But part of that is baked into the design. If that's the design of the organization that you're going to pursue, that's the kind of stuff that's going to happen, especially, and the culture will reflect that kind of hierarchical, very generally speaking, bureaucratic, relatively slow. Ultimately, it makes you a less competitive organization. So to go back to the bus analogy, absolutely right. And that, of course, that it's good to great, right? That's coming from Jim Collins, turning things get easier over time. So the question really for any organization is, what does our bus look like? What's the exterior of the bus? In other words, what's the strategy? What's the vision? What's the context for what goes inside that bus, whatever maybe it turns out to be, Formula One or, some other version. Maybe it's, because you kind of get the bus is, in parallel rows. So you can imagine the people in the front are something and the people in the back are something. But in today's sort of information laden world, and the speed can be almost agonizing for people, the way that the organization is designed is going to reflect, one, values, two, it's going to dictate culture to a certain extent. It's certainly going to dictate the way that information and communication happens in the organization. And all of that adds up to speed. If the market is moving really fast and your organization is lagging in terms of the speed that it can go and also tolerate, right?
Yeah.
You just get further and further from good. There's no way. So if you're on a highway and all you got is a bus, top speed 60 miles an hour, when everybody is flicking by you, sit down and question whether it's a bus or something else that you need, and design to that.
That's really interesting. It makes me think about this, Sean, and you can speak to this a little bit. How important is it for the leaders of companies to have trust in their people so that they can empower their people to make some of those decisions so it doesn't slow everything down?
Yeah. Well, it's crucial. I mean, if the CEO, the founder, CEO, whatever we want to refer to them as, believes wholeheartedly that they have the right answer, and the process of making decisions is about them lobbing it out to their people to see if they come back with the answer that they've already decided is correct. That's not a trust-based environment, right? They're not open to advice. They have positioned themselves as the, know-it-all leader, and all they're doing is testing their people. And they think success is defined by, are my people getting smarter and smarter? Meaning, do they agree more and more with me, right? It's slow, it's painful. You can look at, the statistics on companies that operate like that. They have higher churn, they lose good people, they're constantly trying to replace them. They actually get slower and slower and slower as a result of the fact that they're concentrating decision making at the top of the organization. So I think what a good CEO founder has to do is figure out a way to frame the problem, right, in a way that's really accurate and really open to multiple solutions. Today, every problem has multiple solutions. I think there's never just one. So if you're going to have trust, you have to tolerate that your idea is maybe way down the line on, the ladder of good. So, and that again, ego.
Yeah.
Ego is going to continue to come up, right? If you got an ego, trust is going to suffer. If you can let go of the sense that you have to be smarter than everybody else in order to be successful, if you can let go of the fact that somebody else's good idea, which may differ from you, is not a threat, it's actually a relief. It's a sign that you're operating a good company. When you put an idea on the table and someone says, I can build on that, and let me give you my perspective, and all of a sudden it goes from level 1 to level 5, because then you have good people and they know they're in an environment where they can actually innovate and solve problems quickly. Now you're winning. Now you're moving at the speed of the market. But they also, when we go into companies, the things that we do is really try to create a culture of value acceleration. We call it the culture of value acceleration. It's one of the first things we do in companies to sort of set the context for building greater enterprise value and greater success. So you can't just go in and talk about it. You can't just go in and say, hey, we can improve the culture. You have to have a set of tools that help them do that. And there are 3 things you have to do. First, they have to have the tools to figure out what matters together. That's really important. The team has to sort of say, this matters a lot. And those things over there, that's in the B pool of things that matter. Let's focus on the things that matter the most. The second thing is they have to learn and have the tools to make better decisions quickly. And the third thing is they have to be able to manage with grace and also accountability. And those things are going to show up. Now, that's great to talk about. Those are 3 abstract kind of statements. Then to elaborate on them, what kinds of tools can they have? What kinds of systems can they use in order to make that happen in a durable way, right? Remember, you're always bringing new people into the company. You're always losing people. So what are you going to do to onboard people into that kind of culture? Well, if you don't have tools and systems to allow them to sort of say, oh, okay, these are the things that matter. I understand. My perspective matters too. I can make decisions. I've got the authority to do it as long as it's within the context of where we're trying to go as a business. I've still got curbs, right? It's not a free for all. I've still got curbs, but there are lots of different sort of flows to that river. And you're never going to step in the same river twice. It's moving on, right? So you have to be flowing with it. You have to be moving at the speed of the river in order to succeed. So I feel like that we do that first in our work because it's so crucial as a platform, as a foundation for all the other things that we're going to try to do with our client.
I love it. I have a couple things. Manage with grace and accountability.
Yeah.
First and foremost, I tell people this a lot. I see a lot of mission statements, and I see a lot of mission statements hanging on walls.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of mission statements that hang on walls, and that's all they do is they just hang on a wall.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest challenges that CEOs, business owners, business leaders have is taking that, and I don't like calling them mission statements. I try to get my people to do a purpose statement.
Mm-hmm.
What's the purpose of why we do what we do?
Sure.
And that purpose is what I want them to try to get to is the purpose is greater than themselves. That gives them a deeper purpose in what they do. But when I see those things on walls and everything else, my first question is, how are you living that?
Yeah.
How are you, you say all this stuff, but are you living all this stuff? If I went to your employees and asked them, 1, what is your mission statement? Would they know it? 2, if I ask them if they know it and they say, let's say they say yes, or let's say they say no, either one, and I give it to them, then I ask the next question. Do you feel like you're living that every day when you walk in here? And I think those are 2 good questions to ask people. But when we go back to that trust issue, I think you said something that was really cool. Number 3, manage with grace and accountability. To me, those are the trust factors. When you show people grace, that shows that I can make a mistake and I can still work here. I
Oh, yeah.
can make a mistake and I can learn, and they want me to learn and get better from it. I can make a mistake and they're still going to listen to my suggestion the next time.
That's right.
And I think leading with grace
Yeah.
is huge. And accountability, Sean, I think is something that's missing in our country a lot. And I hear that from a lot of business leaders. I just can't, everyone blames everyone else.
Yeah.
And the best way to teach that is to show that, is to act that, is to be that, is to be accountable.
Sure. Well, one of the things that we often say to the owner and the CEO, no matter what position you put yourself, right? If you're the CEO, if you're the director of innovation, whatever it is, if you own the company, you bring the weather. So, and that comes from a really good book, a series of books called Mastering Leadership. One of them is Mastering Leadership. I think that was book number 1, and there's been Scaling Leadership. I think it's book number 2. This is from the Leadership Circle, and they said, remind yourself, if you're a leader, you bring the weather. When you walk into any room, if you're leading a team of people, if you own the company, the way that you frame things, the way that you say things, the way that you make decisions, the way that you encourage other people to participate in the discussions and make decisions is absolutely a controlling factor. Mm-hmm. Context and the environment that you have to create in order to allow accountability to emerge. We always say accountability is not something that you dictate. It's not something that you just tell people they have to. Why aren't you more accountable? Right? I'm not seeing enough accountability out of you. Ask yourself what you're doing to allow accountability to emerge in your organization. What is the state of play, right? Where you could say, on this field, in this stadium, so to speak, we're going to play the game this way. And I and the founder and the CEO take 100% responsibility for creating the conditions that you can be successful in, that you can be accountable, where you can be accountable for your performance. And not poke other people in the eye, not manage with grace when something goes wrong. Because I think that's the measure of a good team, is when something does go wrong, the 5 people on the team that feel like they've done it right don't poke the eye of the person who had a tough time with it. They rally as a team and say, okay, something went wrong. Let's figure out what that is. And then we're gonna get it done. We're here for each other. That's accountability. That's how it shows up in an organization. That's what managing with grace looks like. And everybody's going to have a bad day, right? Sometimes decisions are made because bad information was given.
I agree. And it's okay. I know business, sometimes decisions that you make can cost a lot of money. Sometimes the decisions you make can earn you a lot of money.
Right.
But the whole part of it is the growth and the learning there. And I want to throw another word in there, empowering your people. If, Sean, the reason I do what I do now is I read a stat, and I say this on a lot of my podcasts, but the stat was 70% of Americans are disengaged at work, and 85% of those 70 said it was because of the leadership they work for.
Yeah, sad.
And it's very sad that 7 out of 10 people driving down the street every day are mad that they have to go to work. And they're more mad when they come home. Yeah. And what that does to the family dynamics and so forth. And that's a whole nother show. Right. But how much is the CEO, business owner, business leader responsible for that in employee engagement? And how much is the employee responsible for the employee engagement?
Yeah, I think that everybody bears some responsibility for it.
I agree.
My position has always been that one of the responsibilities, one of the obligations maybe of an employer, whether the employer is, the founder of the business or whether it's something else, it's the responsibility of the leaders of the business, the managers of the business, to create an environment in which people can thrive. And thriving people generally are going to be engaged. But I also believe, as I do around the culture of value acceleration, there must be a set of tools. There must be a framework for employee engagement. It's not just sort of well, we've got an unengaged person over here, an engaged person over here, and they look different, right? It's if someone is disengaged from their work, from the company, if they're feeling disconnected and they don't feel like they can use their superpowers, whatever those may be, within the environment, I don't start with the person. I'm going back and saying, are the conditions right for employee engagement? Where do the disconnects exist, and what kinds of disconnects might there be? And then do we have a system for engaging employees in a way that makes them feel like their superpower can be used, that it's actually showing up, it's being respected? Now, on the employee side, market conditions can change. Right now, although it's changing a little bit, it's still very much an employee-centered market, right? So people are struggling to get good folks. They're paying more for them. When they pay more for an employee, they tend to have higher expectations for performance, and I think that's fair. If the employee feels disengaged, feels like it's a horrible place to work, there are two things that can happen. One, if they're in a place where communication is encouraged and inspiration is respected, there's going to be a way for them to bring that up and say, here's how I'm feeling, and I want to feel differently. But one thing that you have to acknowledge is maybe this just isn't the job or the place for you to work. So if you're going to work and you're feeling like, I don't really know what this means to me or my life or my family, I just feel like I'm kind of in a robot mode and I am really angry about it, then stop and say, is it the right place? And if it's not the right place, find another place, right? Find a better place. Create your own path, I think, is part of the responsibility for all of us. So we can't, if you're feeling disengaged, you can't just point at leadership and say it's their fault. There is self-awareness, there's personal accountability for that. That said, if the leaders are absolutely failing the organization, there's going to be broad failure, right? It's not just going to be you that's feeling bad. There are going to be a lot of people that are, and you're going to see indications of that in talent management, in talent attraction, in talent development, that are just signs that there's a really there's a broad, very deep-seated problem in the organization. But again, you could point to systems, tools, communication, trust, context, design. All of those things can contribute in one way or another to a feeling that the employees are disengaged. It could even be a question of job description. I hate job descriptions. I mean, I know they're sort of necessary, but I kind of hate them because I think it's sort of a list of bullets of stuff that you're supposed to do and might do, and I love the one on the end, and anything else that we ask you to do is like included in this job. So but what's your role in the organization? What's your contribution? How are you going to make it better? What are what's the story around that? And if there are 75 people in your organization with the same job description, you're not all the same, but apparently you're supposed to be. So what's diversity and inclusion look like in the organization? I mean, that's a huge factor. Diverse organizations outperform their peer organizations that don't have that kind of diversity and inclusion initiatives or just a value system. And that's another instance of, if you have diversity and you have inclusion, you're going to have different perspectives. And how do you make use of those? How do you make that be a powerful influence in your organization? That's nuanced leadership. It's very enhanced skill set to really let that happen.
And I is it some of the things you see, Sean, with that is there's just some leaders out there that just can't get themselves to be that type of a leader because they feel like they're losing control.
Yeah, they do. Even the good leaders that I've seen struggle with that. There's a point, but again, I think it's self-awareness to a certain extent, and it's also the ability for a leader to be a little bit more vulnerable with their team. It's okay for the founder and the CEO to sit down with their team and say, I'm feeling nervous. I've got anxiety around this, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Is it because it's a solution that I'm uncomfortable with? Let's explore that. Is it because I thought I had the right answer and you guys are telling me I don't, and I'm sort of hurt and disturbed by that? Is it something else? Why don't they say that to their friends? Why do they feel like they have to be kind of an impenetrable, ivory tower?
Yeah.
That's not communication. But I think a lot of I can say, I don't want to overgeneralize this, but I've seen it time and time again. Diverse organizations, inclusive organizations tend to have better communication. And two, women owners, women CEOs tend to be able to have those kinds of conversations rather than men who have been taught, I think, their entire life that they have to be right, they have to be seen as powerful. They can easily flow over into autocratic leadership because they interpret that as powerful and good, and whatever that is. It's not that. Autocratic leadership is not what they think it is. It's not effective. They do not build more valuable organizations. So I think leaders have to really get comfortable with admitting that they feel like something is not within their control, and that's okay, but trust your team to help you through that.
Yeah.
Rather than just sort of withdrawing into the corner office and kind of hunching over. And then when you're feeling that kind of anxiety, you tend to lash out. You tend to want to take control back, which just disenfranchises the people that you asked come up with a solution or manage something, because you immediately just slap them down and say, no, we're going to go back inside my circle, right? Because I'm the owner, I'm the founder. So what I think matters more, not true at all.
And that leads to humongous disengagement.
Oh,
Why am I here?
yeah.
You brought me in here. I look at it like this. Nowadays, when people get jobs, it's usually a win-win. It's usually because they're working with a company to help them find a job.
Yep.
That company is working for another company that has hired them to help them find people to have a job at their company.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a win-win. Then they get in that situation in 8 months to a year and a half, all of a sudden they're disengaged already.
Yeah.
And it's like you hired these people to come in here because they have special talents. Everyone's a special and has special things that they can do in their own way. But sometimes these leaders don't allow them to do that, allow them to use those talents. Yeah. And now all of a sudden you got a disengaged employee. And
that's when one of the things obviously that we do in our work is helping owners build value that they can harvest in the future. And that takes many different forms. It doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to sell their business to a third party. There are other ways that it can be done. But let's say that they are selling their business or drawing private equity investment into their business or anything, whatever version of that it is. The first stop for a buyer or investor to kind of underwrite the risk in their investment and get comfortable with it is really how are your people? How good are they? How willing are they to engage? How are you developing your talent? How are you attracting talent? Can you get them from your competitor and keep them? There are all sorts of issues that go into that. A lot of owners believe that the conversation starts and ends with the financial performance of the organization. They think that's how they're going to win that conversation, and that it's simply not true. So, and then the other question is going to be, hey, owner, we're going to buy the business from you, and then you're going to go away. Right? So how dependent is the organization on you to succeed? Owners that have kept that level of control, who have not coached, who have not trained and developed their leadership team and stepped back and let them actually run the company, owner dependency is a major discount against enterprise value, probably 30 or 40%. And one could argue if there is a lot of owner dependency there, the company may be completely untransferable to another party. If someone else is going to pay for it, what's the value?
Right.
Marginally zero.
Right.
So I think that owners that trust their teams, that trust their process, that have built the business to survive without them, that's an egoless or very low ego kind of process. But you have to think strategically down the line. Someone someday is going to say, can this business survive well without you? And if your answer based on ego is no, I'm the play caller, right? I'm the final decision maker. Anything like that comes out of your mouth, probably 90% of the potential buyers will walk away from the deal immediately because they know the organization does not have a deep bench. And what do they have to work with?
Fascinating. Gosh, that's great. We're almost running out of time. We've almost been on an hour already. This has been fascinating to talk with you about all this stuff. It's really what a great learning day, growing day for us all. I have 3 questions, Sean, and kind of shut it down. I wrote a book called The 3 Ps, Finding Your Purpose, Perspective, and Passion. So I ask all my guests those 3 questions. What is your purpose in life?
I think that's a good question. So my purpose, my personal purpose in life is to deploy what I know, what I've learned, I guess, my experiences in one way or another, to help other people learn about, access, use their superpowers, whatever they may be. Without, my preference is to be forgotten at the end of that.
Oh, wow.
So I've always said, I'm fine with not being remembered. What I want, though, is to be able, myself, to be able to point to, I had an influence there. Things got better there. Somebody, one person even said, hey, that, whatever we were doing there, that really changed my life. Great. Then they take credit for it, not me. I don't want them to point and say, oh, it was Sean that came up with that idea. Oh, it was Sean that did it. I have no interest in that. So it's kind of like, it goes back to, leave the earth as it was when you found it, in a sense, or better. I don't need to have my handprints, footprints on anything, my name on anything. I really want it to be a kind of silent exit where I've had some influence.
That's cool. That's never really had somebody put it that way. Everyone talks about service and helping and doing all that. Man, that's an unselfish viewpoint. Oh, love it. And I'm going to tell our listeners too, and we didn't really even get into this, but you have founded 5 companies along the way to help you do what you do now. The education you got from owning 5 different companies and starting them and transitioning out and all that is now what you're passing on to someone else. Yeah. Oh, I love that word, empathetic. Next question. I go to passion next. So what's your passion in life? What do you love to do? You said your parents taught you to follow your passion. I love that when you said that.
Yeah. So the passion for me is shows up as emotion or a set of emotions, right? You can feel passion. It's not something that you just talk about. So what passion do I have? It's actually not tied to the work that I do. And I hate to say that because that's like, it's, wait a minute, if he's not passionate about his work, then, he's not. That's true. I think I'm good at what we do. And I love learning from it and continuing to develop as a professional. But, my passion is teaching at the end of the day. It's speaking, it's teaching, it's writing. It's contributing to society in some way that I think, helps us as a planet, as humanity, just take a little bit more step forward. How would I do that? It's strange. I really like working with kids, and I really like working with animals. If there's a passion there for me, it's in helping kids see their way, right? Whatever that's going to look like, and see it as early as possible. So what's their passion? My passion, I suppose, would be to help them find their passion, whatever that might look like. And then with animals, it's really about welfare. It's really about kindness, which I think we need more of. So my passions lie in, trying to I don't know, protect who we are in a sense, to help us as humans just be more successful.
That's awesome. And then I always say this: your purpose and your purpose equals passion, and passion equals purpose. And you just kind of illustrated that by describing what your purpose and passion is. It's all about serving and helping others
Yes.
and
Yeah.
animals.
Yeah. For me, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And what holds it together is your perspective. So if I asked you, what's your perspective on life?
Mm-hmm.
What would you answer that question?
So I had someone ask me, it was interesting. I was doing kind of a coaching session where I was the coachee. And toward the end of the session, it's just a 1 hour conversation. And he said, like what things, what values matter to you, right? Which I think is a kind of perspective. How do you frame up the world?
Right, right.
And before I could even think about it, it's interesting to me. It surprised me. Three things came out of my mouth, and it sounds, I think, a little, maybe for a business person, maybe a little bit soft in a sense. But I said the things that matter to me are truth, beauty, and love. Those are the three things that are going to drive everything that I do. So if I can't tell the truth, or if not working in a truthful environment, I can't succeed. I don't want to be there. That's going to disengage me. Beauty. I love the design of things. I like the aesthetic that we have when we're doing our work, the designs that we can come up with for business owners. There's beauty in that for me. And then love. What more to say? If that's not it, if you're not saying to yourself as a human, you need it and you want to give it, I'm not exactly sure how that isn't part of the conversation in every business, in every relationship. And I think owners and their teams should be willing to talk about that stuff, because that needs to be part of the conversation. There needs to be that level of emotion, I think, in caring about your people, in caring about your team. You got to love them.
It's amazing. You're an amazing guy, Sean. I appreciate you coming on and taking the time. I know your time is valuable. How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. Our companies are all branded under Ready for Next. So we have three companies. One is our consulting group, which is called Ready for Next Advisory Group. We have a learning academy, an online learning academy for both owners and other advisors and coaches called Ready for Next Academy. And then we have a program where we work with communities, whole communities, on value creation, wealth protection, transition readiness in their business community. And that's called Ready for Next Cities. So everybody can go to readyfornext.com. That's kind of the portal. You can find your way to the other businesses. My LinkedIn is Sean, SEANP, as in Patrick, Hutchinson. I love for people to connect with me because I learn and I just like to have conversation.
Yeah, you're always learning and growing too, huh?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I love talking, as you can tell. I like talking. So for me to get into a conversation where I can walk away with, okay, mind blown by that one thing, put that in the packet. We're going to use that one later. That's a great joy for me. And so connect with me on LinkedIn. And then my email address is sean@readyfornext.com, and anybody, anywhere is welcome to use it.
And I highly suggest you do. This has been a powerful hour. You do speaking as well too, Deshaun. Did you used to speak for Vistage too?
I did. I spoke for Vistage. I've spoken at conferences, industry conferences. I speak a lot to our own professional industry around exit planning. We've got so much content on our Ready for Next Academy website. Some of it's free, some of it's paid, but we just create content all the time. And, the more speaking and writing that I can do, honestly, it's just a joyful experience for me. It's the way that I develop my professional capabilities. So I love doing it. And of course, it goes back to the teaching thing, right?
Right. Yeah. I might have to
and leading classes. You're doing that.
I might have to have you in our group, our team, my Vistage team. I'm loving what the Vistage experience, the power of the collaboration and the peer helping peer thing.
It is great. Peer learning is great.
Yeah, it's been fun. So, hey, Sean, I appreciate it. Again, thank you for coming on. This has been over an hour already. and we probably could have kept going. There's a lot of things I still would love to
Lot to
ask
talk
you and
about.
talk to you and
Yeah.
stuff, but I appreciate everyone listening to this week's edition of the People Progressing Podcast with Sean Hutchinson. Please get a hold of him. Please use his services, his companies, and so forth, because I know they can help you out. And I appreciate you all listening. Please subscribe, share this with friends, and so forth. All we're trying to do is help people grow and progress. So thank you for listening, and keep progressing.